Hey folks, this is Jason Lewis, the producer of the From the Shadows podcast. I just want to remind you about our website, FromTheShadowsPodcast.com. We have a Facebook page. We would appreciate it if you like and follow. Also, join our discussion group on Facebook called After the Shadows. We have a Twitter feed. Please follow us on Twitter. It can be found with @podcast_from. Follow us on Instagram at From the Shadows Podcast. We have a YouTube channel. Go to the search bar at YouTube and put From the Shadows Podcast, and please subscribe to that channel. We are also on the Odyssey Radio Network, and we can be found there at odyssey1.com. We're still on the traditional podcatchers that everybody loves to listen to us on. We get a lot of feedback, so please rate the podcast and communicate with whether you're on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, or Google Podcasts. We're there, and we appreciate it when you leave comments for us. We also have a Patreon page. It can be found at www.patreon.com/FromTheShadows. You can receive books, stickers, coffee mugs, and special content just for our Patreon subscribers. Check it out for yourself and see what packages that we have to offer. Well, that's all I have for you right now, folks, and thanks for being a part of the From the Shadows podcast family. So with that being said, let's get this episode started.
Hey, welcome everybody to this episode of the From the Shadows podcast. I'm your host, Shane Grove, and with me deep in the bowels of the From the Shadows podcast studios is the Judge.
Good afternoon. You put a lot of pressure on me for an intro, and I wasn't prepared for
That's
it.
what happens when you're deep in the bowels.
I'm deep in the bowels.
There's a lot of pressure. And man in the mixing board is super producer Jason. What's happening?
Greetings, everybody. I'm doing well. How about yourself there, host?
Hey, it's almost Christmas, so I'm glad that it's almost Christmas.
Have you delivered enough packages? Are you really
Apparently
getting tired
not. If you look online and see the dissatisfaction of the majority.
I don't know, but I saw a picture of it's on Facebook. It's just miles of undelivered mail, and they're saying, "Come on, postman, let's do it."
Listen,
Do your
I
duty.
deliver everything that comes my way.
I just got a medical bill from 5 years ago.
Wow. All right, what are we all gathered here today for?
We're here to talk about the post office, right?
No. Think again.
Well, I'm super excited after talking to our guest. I came across this story on one of the, many Bigfoot Facebook pages that I check out, and his story just jumped right out. And then after talking to him, I knew we had to have him on the show. So, joining us to tell his very interesting couple Bigfoot stories is Jim from Oklahoma. Jim, how you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Great to be on, and Merry Christmas coming up to you, man.
Oh, thank you. You as well.
Yes, exactly. Merry Christmas to you too.
So, Jim, you want to let's just jump right in, man. Tell us.
Interestingly enough, Oklahoma is a hot spot for Sasquatch sighting.
Yes, it is.
And you wouldn't think that.
Right.
Having been to Oklahoma, I would not think that. But apparently you do the research and you watch the shows. Oklahoma is a hotbed for Sasquatch.
Yeah, and I think once Jim gets into it and he explains kind of where his sightings took place, it's even more of kind of a strange situation. So,
all right.
So Jim, you want to
jump in?
Well,
man.
Yeah.
What you mentioned was Oklahoma being a hot spot. I was born and raised in McAllister, Oklahoma. It's in southeastern Oklahoma. And Hobnobia, which they have the Bigfoot festivals there, the Muddy Boggy Creek area. People there call places the Boogaboo, which they say mythical creatures. Atoka is in southeastern Oklahoma. Their mascot is a wampus cat. Mythical. Yeah, that is their mascot. So that's kind of where I was born and raised. Now, flash forward to now, I'm 54. I live in Oklahoma City. and I'm an avid kayaker. I kayak a lot, not near as much as I used to, but this North Canadian River cuts through Oklahoma, slices through kind of the top corner down to the bottom corner, and it used to not be a popular river to float, but my business partner and best friend of mine and I always floated it. Well, I floated 200 miles a stretch of that river, not at the same time, all at different points. And part of it cuts through the edge of actual Oklahoma City. And it is a property called the Stinchcombe Wildlife Refuge. And a family donated it years ago. I have no stories in my life from growing up in the McAlester, southeastern Oklahoma area. No stories on this 200 miles of river that I've floated for thousands and thousands of accumulative miles, except in this mile and a half or so of the Stinchcombe.
And that's on the edge of Oklahoma City?
It's on the edge of Oklahoma City.
So here's a little fun fact about Oklahoma City. And if I totally blow this, Jim, you jump in and cut me off. But I once was in Oklahoma City for a wrongful death case. It was a car seat case.
That's not a very fun fact.
No, it's not. It wasn't. But while I was there, a cab driver told me that Oklahoma City is so big, stretched out so wide that you could put New York City with inside its borders like 7 times.
Yeah, wow. It is either the largest or it's in the top 3.
Land mass.
Yeah, land mass wise.
So,
you bet.
Interesting fact about that is that because it's so big and there's forests within the city and all this stuff, that the cab driver told us that there were no vice cops out at night.
No vice cops out at night
because you just for our listeners out there, this is a family show, but vice cops are police officers, women pretending to be hookers, and they bust people trying to pick up hookers. Well, they quit doing that because it's so big that you could just disappear. Like they could snatch you and you just disappear. It's very dangerous.
Right.
Because it's so big.
Yeah. It is huge. You don't get anywhere quick. You don't get anywhere. Yeah, you don't get anywhere quick here. Tell him to go down by the state capitol. He'll score there.
Capitol.
So on these trips, like I said, I can't. There's nothing I can't explain or pass off as something else. I want to tell the listeners that. And this is no disrespect to anybody or anything. I don't consider myself a Bigfooter. I've never left my home in search of Bigfoot. Like I said, no disrespect to anybody that has. I find it quite fascinating, to be honest with you. But what I'm going to say is just what happened while I was floating. And when you're floating, I want to add that you're stealth. If you're not talking and you're not paddling, there is no sound. You must be a stick or a log floating on the water. And that's how my one eye sighting happened, was floating probably about 11 o'clock at night. There were 4 of us, my wife and 2 close friends, and the 2 close friends was lagging behind. And we didn't know how far back they were, so we wasn't paddling. We were just trying to let them catch up. So in the meantime, we was just taking in the sights and sounds. When I float at night, I call it in stereo because you hear all the coyotes and the owls hooting. The bats will swoop down around you and things like that. I just love floating at night. And this night I was about 12 foot off of the bank towards the middle, and my late wife was skirting along the edge of the riverbank because it was just a straight drop off, and she was literally, probably scratching the edge of the sand right there at the bank every now and then. But I noticed a dark figure on the edge of the bank, but I didn't take any note of it. I just immediately looked away and was looking off to my left, my wife being on my right hand side. And all of a sudden, I just heard her let out probably the biggest gasp I've ever heard anybody let out. So I jerked my head to my right to look at her, and she had jerked her head around to look at me because she was looking to her right as well. So she didn't see anything after a certain point, and I didn't really see anything before a certain point. And that was that she had her kayak or her paddle sitting on top of her kayak in front of her, and she seen this supposed bush coming up. So she moved her paddle as not to connect with the bush, and it caused a little scratch sound on top of the kayak, and that's when everything went crazy. And I say crazy, it's just crazy that it happened. It wasn't a big hoopla deal, but it was just that it was a Bigfoot. It wasn't a bush. It was a Bigfoot drinking out of the river. And when it heard the scratch, it jerked its head to stare at her. And they were 3 foot apart. They could have literally touched one another.
So what was the visibility like? You said it was 11 o'clock at night. What was the, obviously different times of the year, the different moon phases and things like that. How clear was it at night?
Well, it was okay. You get a glow off of the city. So I never use flashlights at night. I mean, unless I'm doing something intricate, trying to tie something or something like that, I never use flashlights at night. I hate them. And out there on the river, where I'm talking about in the Stinchcombe, you get a glow off of the city. So there's a light, a little bit of light, and then sometimes you get a good moon glow. But for her, she could tell you every detail within that 1 second or whatever that she was staring right at it. They locked eyes, and when she went into kind of like a shock, I couldn't get her to even speak a word for probably 5-10 minutes after this all happened.
So was it on all fours, or was it just in a squat?
No, it was just squatted, just a squat, like a catcher squat. That's why it looked like a bush, because it was just all, low and together. And it was just reaching down with its hand and scooping water. It literally had a scoop of water in its hand when she did the scratch and they caught eyes together. But so they look at each other. When I get her to talk, it's brown, it's hairy, doesn't have much hair on its face, but some, and its eyes were she said, just insanely piercing eyes. It was just like, and they were coppery, orangey eyes. But like I said, again, she was right on it. And that's her take and her end of it, because she turned to look at me. She never saw it stand. She never saw it move at all after that point. She just saw that one part. Oh, that's a bush. My paddle's going to get caught up in it if I don't move it. Bam. This is something crazy.
So basically, you guys were in stealth mode, as you described.
Yeah.
And it did not know you were coming because you were
in
stealth mode. Mm-mm. And she touched it with the paddle, thinking that she was going to hit a bush, and it startled it as much as.
Right. We snuck up. I know this isn't probably a popular opinion amongst Bigfooters, but we literally snuck up on it.
Well, but you saying that, though, that's not the first time I've heard that, where people have come up upon them in the river,
squatted down,
drinking or trying to catch a fish, and because of the noise of the river and the activity they're doing, they have no idea that you're behind them.
And it seems to me like I think I told you before that anytime that we catch a fisherman or anybody like that off guard, they always seem to be slightly canted downstream.
Yeah.
Their body language, their body positioning is always slightly, for whatever reason, canted downstream.
Well, you know, the thing about it is, and I'm assuming that a Sasquatch would have a heightened sense of, you know, smell, hearing, and stuff like that. But that's out in the woods, and
even though it's in the city,
it's in the city. But yeah, because Oklahoma City. But that's when it's in its environment and it's moving and it knows there's the possibility it could come across a human. I mean, 11 o'clock at night, stealthy river, I'm sure this thing had no idea that it could accidentally come across a human.
Well, let me say that in 20 years, now I've floated it now for 30-something years, but at the time, about 20 years of floating it, I never saw another person float it at night, ever. Never.
Yeah, I think that would be somewhat dangerous. Well, because
maybe, perhaps.
How deep is that river?
Oh, generally, if you fall out, you stand up.
Okay.
Okay.
But it is known back in the day, in the old days, it was known as the something killer river, because flash floods come out of nowhere. Yeah. And
you never know. You fall out and you hit your head on a rock and get knocked out. I don't care if it's 6 inches of water, you could drown.
So
right.
So now your wife lets out a gasp. You guys meet eyes. Now you got eyes on this thing. Then what?
Well, actually, I don't see it. It's directly behind her.
Oh, okay.
So I just start kind of in a maybe a little slightly animated voice saying, "What? Because I wasn't used to her being upset or startled. She's always like an even keel type deal, never cries, never is shocked hardly by anything, or wasn't. And while I'm saying what, it slowly stands up behind her, and still it can touch her. So I'm immediately in awe, terrified, don't know what's going to happen next, felt hopeless and helpless. And if it wants to do whatever it wants to do to my wife right now, there's nothing I can do about it. But it stood slowly, did a 180 in 2 steps, and blended into the forest and was gone. It never made a peep, never made a sound. I think it was, like I said, I think it was startled and shocked by us sneaking up on it, totally by accident. And that's pretty well what happened on my 30 plus years of floating the North Canadian River, of my one where I say I had an eye sighting and saw it personally. And you were asking about detail and stuff. Me being at the night and all that, me being 12 foot away, it was less detail, more outline. I could easily make out the size, the shape, that it had long hair, all those things. But the finer details, like the nose.
No doubt that what you saw was not a person.
Zero. Like I said, floating for 20 years, if it was a person, I always tell my friends or anybody asks me about it, what was the joke? Because I'd have crapped my pants if it had yelled and waved its arms or did any animated deal. I'd have fell out of my car. I wouldn't have known what to do. And the guy would have had a funny story and a funny video. But I tell people, it was a man in a monkey suit or it was a Bigfoot. I don't care which one you think. We didn't shake hands. We didn't swap spit. Believe what you want to believe. I'm just telling you my story, and that I know for 20 years that I floated, no one else, seeing no one else. Whoever dressed up in a big giant ass suit and would walk out there through heavy marshes and thick brush and all of that to sit on the bank shooting long odds that somebody was going to come floating by, period.
Well, the other thing is it harkens back to the original Star Wars in the Chewbacca suit, where they were scared to death to get it wet.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, I mean that would just make no.
It makes no sense.
It's one thing to go out and to play a trick. It's another thing to go out and sit in the river. In that, I mean, oh my gosh. So what?
Yeah.
So
And it's Oklahoma, and you get yourself shot.
yes.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Absolutely.
So what's then the discussion between you and your wife?
Well, I did I kept on. What I need to know what you saw. You were right there. I need to know. It was just like oh my God, because, and we'll probably get into it, but all these other things have happened to me before this eye sighting and some after. But, I didn't see those things or hear those things or those things happen to me and go, oh, that was a Bigfoot. That had to have been a Bigfoot, because I'm just not that kind of guy. I still, after all these things that have happened and everything else, I don't consider myself a Bigfooter. I consider myself a person that loves to go kayaking, that in this one spot, I keep having things happen over and over and over. I've had them happen with my late wife, had them happen with a past girlfriend and my current girlfriend. We just had an experience probably 2 months ago. And since those initial 20 years of not seeing anybody floating and all of that stuff, it's completely changed out there now. I was on the show Finding Bigfoot, and I don't want to pat myself on the back or say anything because I don't really care. But that's when it started becoming really popular. I would see people on the bank and they would go, "You're the guy on Finding Bigfoot." I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh man, pull over for a second and just tell me, am I in the right area? Am I looking the right way?" And then
you should have told everybody no. It's like 3 miles.
Right. Oh, dude. Yeah. I'll tell you the one that they all wanted. Like 3 or 4 people asked me, just in the randomness of asking about the show and all of that. They would go, "Hey, is Renee as hot in person as she is on the show?" I would always get taken back by that.
Well, I guess that's better than asking if Bobo is his.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. He's not my favorite. I'll just say.
Their own man.
Yeah.
I only judge people professionally, not personally.
Right. Exactly.
So
but, we were talking and I really couldn't get much out of her. And then when I did, it was just, what she saw, what I've kind of already told you, that, hey, I thought it was a damn bush. And I didn't know that. And then, the brown and the hairy and the coppery orange eyes, she said reminded her like a orangutan type eyes.
Yeah. Did she say anything about maybe was there a peculiar smell next to that bush? Well, at the time
that never got brought up.
Okay.
Never got brought up.
And those orange, like flecked eyes, were they? She was able to tell that it was orange reflection because of the little subtle light that was around from the moonlight.
Well, she was saying the actual color was an orangey, coppery type color. That's how she described it. Not that there was a reflection or anything like that.
Okay, that's fascinating. Still,
well, and based upon the size that you described, it isn't like a primate could have escaped from the zoo, or the bottom line is there's a lot of people out there who get primates when they're little, and then these things become lethal at about age 2. Mm-hmm. And they decide, hey, listen, we're going to dump these things, and but from what you're describing, I think it would be way too big to be in a
right. Now, what you just said, I've seen a 15-foot python in this off of this river. There's marshes and swamps all off of this river, and then dry strips of land. And I saw it was maybe a late spring, early summer, something like that, a 15-foot python in one of these marshes. And that's exactly what happened there. It probably didn't live through the first winter it faced, but this place looks You know, we called it, we were floating like it was back in the NAM, because we were right there at the city, but it looked like you're in the middle of freaking nowhere and cattails and swamps and stuff. But someone, you know, that python outgrew someone, and it looks like a great python habitat out there. I can't do anything else with this thing. And they took it out there and dumped it. So
yeah, I was driving from Mansfield back to Bucyrus, and on Route 30, major thoroughfare, and I'm driving, and I look, and they're sitting on the side of the road is this big bobcat, and bobcats are not indigenous, so I immediately call the sheriff's department, and the first thing they say is, "Oh yeah, that's probably so and so's. It got out again." I'm like,
Lord,
what the hell are you talking about? He got out again. He's not allowed to have this stuff. So there's things that
they got the right permits.
Listen,
they can
was
have
it in
now.
Crawford County?
Yeah.
Then you're the judge. Do something about it.
I'm not the prosecutor's office or the police. I can't charge people. I can only deal with cases when they appear in front of me.
Okay. Well, this is something we need to talk about off the air.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, and I'm sitting there. The thing is, it was just sitting there watching the traffic go by. And let me tell you something.
Yeah.
It was big and well fed. So it wasn't
I've had a similar experience. Yeah. But the Bigfoot deal, you know, like I said, all the things that led up to it that are in the same area, the different people that have said things and that have done things, like the steel Bigfoot cutout. I believe I sent you a picture of that.
Yeah, you sent me a picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll end up putting that up on social media. So that
By the way, there's one of those is you're going to Mohegan, and you're driving there, and I'll tell you what, it was broad daylight, and it made me it made me lurch. I was like, man, I'm telling you what. And the thing is, the way they do it is they put the eye so that they'd be reflective at night. You're driving down this little road going up to Mohegan to Pleasant Hill Dam. I mean, you see that thing at night, it scared the hell out of you. It would. I was like, that's not a good joke, man. Somebody wrecked your car.
So
Now see,
what was
this cutout is not a professionally done one. This is a guy that I've never talked to the guy. I never saw the guy. I actually, and I know this is a no-no, but I crossed his fence to go investigate what was going on. And he has a gun range set up out in a field out beside the river, where he just has a bunch of cardboard and targets and stuff like that. But for whatever reason, he was moved to take a big plate of steel, I mean a big one, and cut out the shape and form of a Bigfoot, weld a little piece of rebar for his mouth. He's anatomically correct. He has a hand.
That's what we're laughing.
Yeah. He has a hand that's flipping you off that rotates. Like if you shot it, it would spin that hand.
Okay.
There's a rod and a piece of pipe behind it that makes it like that. And then back in the day when I first found it, that picture that you're looking at is probably from about 5-6 years ago. But when I first saw it, it was about 15 years ago. It was painted brown, had a red kill sight on its chest, painted on its chest, and shot all those times. Obviously, this guy's got it out for Bigfoot. Why it wasn't a bear or a boar or a deer or something that's might be around here, why it was what I consider a Bigfoot, because what I saw was 6'6", 6'6" plus maybe, and maybe 450, 500 pounds. And this thing happens to be, probably 7 foot and kind of shaped and everything like what I saw. And the fact that it has huge feet at the bottom, it's like this guy has some encounter or some angst about Bigfoot. Bigfoot scared his old lady, killed his dog, did something for him to do this. That's my opinion.
No doubt.
Now that's not, and you said that's not very far then from that stretch on the river?
It's actually adjacent to it. He's the last property owner before the Stinchcombe starts.
Okay. So go ahead. Let's go back to the first time you had something happen that you didn't know what it was, but.
Okay. Well, like I said, not being a Bigfooter, I heard several sounds and howls and things that I'm like, that's not a coyote. That's not, this or that. But I never took that leap. And then I told you about the deer. In the 200-mile stretch, thousands of cumulative floated miles, I've never seen a dead deer on the bank anywhere on my travels except in the stench cone. And I found 8 in the exact same spot. Like you could lay them on top of one another. But I would see one year, I would see one 3 months later, I would see one 2 years later, I'd see one 3 years later in the exact same spot. Me not being a Bigfooter, I see a deer and think, dead deer poacher. Someone's in here poaching deer. So after the first couple, I started getting out and looking at them. No holes, no arrow, no bullet, no blood, maybe other than the mouth. But every bone in their body broke. And I'm talking every bone. The legs were broke multiple times. Their rib cage, when you would press in on its chest, it'd just be a bunch of crunching and mush.
Like something had just grabbed this thing and just broke every bone in it and then didn't eat it.
Well, like I said, maybe 3 of the 8 were partially mutilated, but the other, say 5, were still intact. And one of them, rigor mortis set, and that happens quick with deer. Rigor mortis hadn't even set in, and it was still warm. That was the first one that I examined and looked at, and it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I mean, I got a real uncomfortable feeling, and that's the one that made me get out of my kayak on all the other ones, is because I wanted to see, hey, is this a thing? Is this, and what is this? Because I tell people, these deer, multiple deer, did not get hit by a car and get to this place. Something killed it and broke all its bones, or people are dropping it from helicopters. You can take your pick. I don't care which. Now, when I told the Bigfoot people this, Bobo said he had heard reports of Bigfoots ambushing deer on game trail and would pick them up by the hind legs or front legs and beat them against a tree.
Oh my
God! Like a baseball bat. Right. That's what he told me. So take that for whatever it's worth or whatever. So there's the 8 dead deer in one place. There's all these unexplainable sounds. There's the Bigfoot steel cut out by the landowner adjacent to the property. But there were 2 rock throws. I'm going to start with this one that was just 2 months ago. Number one, nothing's happened in a few years. 3-4 years, maybe something like that, that I couldn't explain or whatever. But the one 2 months ago with my current girlfriend, we was floating up the river and we saw a beaver and it splashed its tail. We saw a couple of water moccasins. One dropped down out of the tree and started swimming. She was cool. Let's keep going. Let's go. And again, we went out there hoping something happened. We was out there because it's so freaking cool to float at night. Is why we were out there. And then all of a sudden, we heard a little something, and I can't say what it was or even the sound, but something caught our attention. It might have been like heaving something or whatever, but we looked in a direction, and here's like a 30, 40, 50-pound rock in the air, and then hits in the water, coming in towards our direction. We was a pretty good ways from this. I would say 50 foot maybe. But that's the thing that made her turn around. She was like, "Nope, I'm out." Oh, yeah. the snake did. Yeah, the snake didn't do it. The beaver didn't do it, and all that. But this rock deal, because of course she knows all my stories, so she's like, "Oh my God, something's about to happen." Well, it was dead silent. We just stopped for a second. It was dead silent, and I just let out a real loud yell in its direction, and nothing happened. It was still just dead silent. There wasn't anything happened. Now, the more interesting rock throw happened about 6 years ago, past girlfriend, at dusk, and we were kind of yucking it up and talking and laughing or whatever, and all of a sudden we hear a click, 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 and it just a bunch of clicks. It made us look up to our right on an elevated sandbar type deal, and the clicking was this rock, boulder, whatever you want to say, coming from inside the woods out directly towards us. Now, it fell probably 2 to 3 foot short of hitting her. It threw it directly at her. I mean, splashed all water all over her. I'm probably 3-4 foot on the other side of her. It splashed water all over me, and it was one of those big, whoosh, where it, but it would have killed her or broke whatever it hit. It was maybe a 40-pound rock. Well, at that time, nothing had happened for maybe 4 years or something like that, and my mouth just dropped. I knew immediately. I mean, it like the half second I saw it, I knew immediately what it was. Well, this girl had always heard my stories, and she wanted to believe, but she also wanted to see. She wanted proof. She wanted, and before I knew it, she had banked her kayak, jumped out, and ran straight into the woods in the direction that rock came from. And I was like, oh, damn, So I pulled over, got out, walked up there. We're looking all around. There's nothing to see. It's getting darker. And I tell her, you notice something about this area here? There is no rocks. There's not small rocks, medium rocks, big rocks. There is no rocks. And she was like, yeah, that is kind of weird that just one random 40-pound rock would come flying out of the woods, So I said, hey, listen, it's getting dark. We got to get the hell out of here. Got her back in the kayak, and I got a phone call. I had been posting, I always post pretty pictures from, floats and things like that, and I had been doing that. And it was actually Garth Brooks's cousin. A friend of mine, Jackie Brooks, called me on the phone and was like, hey, man, you're going to have to take me and my wife sometime. And I was like, hey, no problem, we'll do that. And then in the middle of this phone conversation, it was and it was just something walking literally right beside us, but just out of the side view of it. You couldn't see anything, but my girlfriend started freaking out and saying, you got to get off the phone. So I told him that I had to get off the phone. Pardon me. And she started saying, that's two-legged. And I was like, you don't have to convince me. I know it's two-legged. She was like, I've owned horses my whole life. That's not four-legged. I was like, hey, Melissa, I know what this is that's following us. And so we just silently kept going down the river. And it probably followed us for like a quarter mile. And then it started veering off into the woods. So the footsteps started getting lighter and lighter. So we pulled over on the left bank and got out. And I was like, what do you think now? And she was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And right then a doe started screaming. And I mean, I've killed a whole bunch of deer and I know what they sound like and all of that. This one was in a fight for its life. It was insane. And with the screaming, you could hear a, and then you could hear a whoof, whoof, and it sounded like a fist hitting a pillow. And you could hear it just over and over. It wasn't a crack. It wasn't a slap. It sounded like a fist hitting a pillow, grunts, and a doe screaming for its life. And then in the middle of the, and when everything went silent, and we didn't hear a peep after that. And that's pretty well my Bigfoot experiences on the river. But like I say, it all added up when I saw it for myself. You know, I probably had seen 4 or 5, maybe 6 deer at the time. I had seen the Bigfoot cut out. An acquaintance of mine had told me of like a Bigfoot attack that happened right where I float. And he knew nothing about my stories or anything else. It was completely unsolicited and believable and all that. I generally don't retell it because it's not what I saw. It's not my. I can speak with what I saw and what I experienced with 100% knowledge that that's a fact. That's why when the Finding Bigfoot crew came here to Oklahoma, number one, they came here because I called them. And Moneymaker called me back and said, we're coming to Oklahoma. And I was like, bull crap, you're not coming to Oklahoma. They were like, man, we'll be there. And he told me a date. It was like in a month and a half. It just happened real quick. But, you know, I don't know. It does leave me a bit baffled being from southeastern Oklahoma, where there's miles and miles and miles of forest that you would think you were in the middle of Colorado or something like that, that there's places like I told you that the mascot is a mythical shape-shifting cat and things like that. That's where I'm from.
There would be people argue there's nothing mythical about that.
Right, exactly right. But, you know, if I was to want to make up a story or anything like that from my childhood or anything like that, that's where it would be from. It wouldn't be from Oklahoma city limits. It baffles me. I'm at a loss for words almost on how and why, other than it has to have a lot of food in that area. It's overran with deer. The fact that all my experiences, except this last one where the last rock got thrown, but all the dead deer, the other rock throw, most of the sounds, the eye sighting, they've all been from what I consider the south or southwest bank. And it doesn't have public trails on it and things like that. It's a lot more, unless you swim the river or you hike in from the backside or on a kayak or some type of boat, you can't get to it. So that's where all mine happen. And I think it's pretty well hidden in this really relatively small spot. And
well, once again, I think if you've ever been to Oklahoma City and you actually have driven it and been there, you'd understand how huge it is. Yeah. And that literally you're driving, and this just blew me away. I'm in a cab and we're driving, and you're in what appears to be a metropolitan area, and then right there in what appears to jump out in the middle of the city is a complete forest.
Kind of like the metro parks in Cleveland.
I mean, but yeah, it's like, I mean, it's just unreal. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought I was just in the city. And the cab's like, yeah, you got to understand something. And I think, and I can't remember, like I said, either he said Chicago or New York City. Said you could hide either Chicago or New York City like 7 times inside the geographical limits of Oklahoma City. It's so big.
Yeah, we just keep annexing further out. So you hit Oklahoma City limits and drive probably 10 miles of woods and farmland before you ever see Oklahoma City.
Yeah, and that's considered the city limits.
So Jim, now obviously none of your experiences have deterred you from getting back out there on the river and floating.
Oh, no.
Now, do you think if that episode with your late wife would have been a little bit different, would that have, I mean, because that could have gone bad real quick. I mean, does that ever go through your mind? Or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like I said, that's all that came over me when I saw it was pretty much fear and helplessness. Like, if this thing decides to do something, what am I going to do? And you was talking about shooting, if someone here in Oklahoma, you get your ass shot. Well, generally, I would take this little pistol with me, but that night I didn't have it. And you know what? I tell people that if I did have it, I don't. I was petrified. I mean, I was like literally petrified. So would I have pulled it and shot? Well, I don't know. I have no. I don't know that I would have. I never felt like it wanted to hurt us. That it just was shocked and wanted to get away. But it's still its immense size and its proximity to my late wife and things like that was unnerving as hell.
What's interesting though about that is your reaction. If I would have had the gun, I don't know how I would try to shoot it. When you listen to a lot of Bigfoot encounters with hunters who have guns,
high-powered rifles,
and some of these guys, you know, some of the most famous stories. What's his name? My gosh, he's deceased now. He just passed away. One of the most famous Bigfoot encounters. You know, he's in a tree stand, you know, waiting to shoot a deer.
Oh yeah.
And was it? Oh gosh, I can't remember his name.
Down in Louisiana.
Yeah, and this thing is within 50 yards of him, and he's got a gun, and I mean, he easily could have shot it. But a lot of these people are like, look, I'm worried that I don't have a high enough powered rifle
Just escalate
caliber
the situation. Yeah.
To you know, I'm worried I'm going to make it mad.
Just make it mad.
Right.
20. I mean, you think about it. If all you have is a 22 rifle or something like that,
right?
You're gonna
it's kind of like the scene in Blazing Saddles, where
right,
Cleavon
Mongo.
Little's going to go out, and Gene Wilder says, "No, you're just going to make him mad.
Whatever you do, don't shoot him. Why not? Because you're
Right.
just going to make
Mongo mad."
Right.
And it's kind of that whole thing is that the other thing is that people have said is that I would have shot it, but its face looked too human. It's just one of those things that just didn't seem right to do. Now you're out in the woods and a bear is acting aggressively and coming at you. People don't have any problem squeezing off a shot.
No.
If not only to hit it, but to scare it. But for some reason, people freeze when they see and when they're faced in what would describe as a monster.
Yeah, they can like see the intelligence in this thing's face. I mean, they know.
Yeah, it was almost like, my bad. This is not supposed to happen. I'm out, guys. Sorry. It was just, and it all happened so fast. You know, it wasn't. This isn't like a 3-minute deal or a 2-minute deal.
This is I don't know. Maybe you've told us and maybe you didn't. Now you're kind of just floating. At what speed are you moving down the river? I mean, so
Very, very slow. Like a slow walking pace.
Okay, so when you encounter this thing, it isn't like you're speeding by it. It's right there.
No.
And so I guess the scary thing for me, if I was in your situation, is if this thing wanted to, it could have just stepped into the water and snatched you right up.
Well, if it can pick a deer up and smack it against a tree, it could easily pick up 2 canoes.
Well, I mean, we just think of it this way. Let's just do some basic physics. You know, they have said that the average gorilla, the average gorilla could, if you could actually get it to lay down on a bench press and put weights on it and say, okay, we went to press this, can press over 1,000 pounds. Mm-hmm. The average gorilla could, silverback could, if you could get it to lay down on a bench and, get somebody to put 1,000 pounds on there, that it could press 1,000 pounds. Now that is a creature that is 5 foot, 5.5 foot tall, 300, 400 pounds maybe. And now you're saying, well, let's compare and contrast that to something 6, 8, 9, 10 foot tall and weighs 800 to 1,000 pounds. How strong is that thing?
Oh, well,
yeah,
we know
see, what?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say what I saw was probably in the 6'6", 6'8", and I guesstimated for him. Weight, I'm not as good on. Height, I do measurements very well. I've been a ceramic tile man my entire life, so I measure hundreds of times a day. I know measurements, and what I saw was about 6'6", 6'8", over the top in its stocky build, and it was probably 500 pounds. But its strength limitations, at the time I was looking at it, it didn't look like it had any. It looked like it looked like it could push a tree over. It looked like it could do. And I also normally tell people when I talk about the rock throws was either one of them. Whoever won the shot put in the last Olympics, could not have thrown this rock.
Yeah, go pick up a 40-pound rock and see how far you can throw it.
It couldn't happen.
Not
I
very
mean,
far.
Well, look, I go in the weight room. I go in the weight room all the time, and and I swing a 42-pound kettlebell.
right.
And, let me tell you something. I couldn't throw a 42-pound kettlebell very far, and that's even got the handle on it where you could get a nice, rocking, swinging motion.
Yes, and he's talking about something coming
through
the trees.
Oh, yeah.
Down
It's
into
insane.
the river.
It's insane.
Yeah.
When you think about it, we talked about this on the other show. I mean, you just look at the strength of just your average chimpanzee.
Oh, yeah.
They rip your arm out,
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So the interesting thing about your encounter is that, predators, and you have to think that Sasquatch is a predator if it's grabbing deer and crunching them up, and people.
Right.
This thing's a predator. It's a predator because it's got its eyes in the front of its head. Mm-hmm. It's got its eyes in the front of its head. So you got to think to yourself, predators that get surprised. If you're walking along a trail and you startle a grizzly bear, its first instinct's not to run. If you startle it, it'll kill you. Mm. Now, maybe it won't kill you. Maybe it'll just beat the hell out of you and drag you off and then leave you alone.
No, I think it'll kill you.
Yeah, probably. But I've watched those shows that I'm lucky to be alive or attacked by this or whatever. I Was Prey is the show. Yeah. And you think to yourself, anytime you startle a predator, especially a large predator, you got to think it's going to be a bad result. Mm-hmm. So the fact that this thing was startled and did not act aggressively, you should feel very lucky.
Well, it should.
Yeah, it was. It held its what I would consider held its composure real well. Just silently stood and took 2 steps and was gone.
Well, I think that shows a certain level of intelligence too. That you know what I'm saying. That to know that it's not in danger and that you pose no real threat with a paddle.
And you talk about intelligence on the rock throws. I tell people, if you're going to push me on, well, why would Bigfoot be standing there with a rock and throw it at you? On these 2 instances, because of the size of the rock and all of that, I think they were laying in wait behind some bushes or trees or whatever on a known game trail to them with a large rock, waiting to pounce on a deer or slam it with this rock and then go from there. And then when me and my girlfriend come floating by there and we're talking and yucking it up and all of that, he's like a human hunter. Like, well, this is screwed up now. There's not a deer going to come by here, you son of a bitch, and throw the rock out of frustration.
You're probably right on with that.
I can't. I've tried and I thought about it. I really can't come up with any other good explanation. Oh, and the rock, when I said I was making a point that there wasn't any other rocks to be thrown in that one area, when we floated down and it was following along beside us, when we got to a little inlet, there was a man-made laid rock inlet where, for erosion purposes. And it was like, those rocks in that inlet deal right there look exactly like what got thrown straight at us. It was like it took it from there, walked upstream a quarter mile, and hung out and hid in his goodie spot, waiting for a deer. That's
so. Imagine, number one, just being able to bend down and pick up a 40-pound rock, and then carry it for a quarter mile.
Right.
Like that would not be fun, especially through the woods and stuff or along the creek or whatever. I mean, you're talking about something that's beyond what we can even imagine.
Yeah, very strong. Yeah.
So the finding Bigfoot people come. What do they do as far as an investigation into what your story was, and did they find anything or?
Well, I have 4 kayaks, and Renee went on another little mission deal, and I floated with the 3 men in our kayaks, and I showed them places and spots and whereabouts, and they went out on their own and did a daytime and a nighttime. Then west of here, there's a casino, Lucky Star Casino. It's probably 30 miles, maybe 40 from here. And they got permission from the Native Americans to go out on their land behind there. And then there's a town south of Norman, Oklahoma called Lindsay. It's probably 100 miles from this casino. They went down there and did some daytime, nighttime. And they gathered hair from all three areas. And we have, like, what I've heard is the best hair analysis deal in the world. But they took them there. And when they got the results back, Cliff told me point blank to my face that it came. I said, what did they come back as? And he said, unknown but related.
Wow.
This is from a place that if you take them a baboon hair, it's going to say baboon. If you take them, a horse hair, it's going to spit it out as a horse. And he told me to my face, unknown but related. The episode comes out and it says that they were compromised and kind of too degraded to tell. That's bullshit.
It sounds like it. Oh my God. I mean, they do what? DNA sequencing on that. Either it is what it is, or it's coming up unknown, something they don't have any classification for.
So they left that, well, other than saying it was unknown, but other than saying that there was some relation or whatever, that it was too degraded to tell. So another deal that they left out was that when I catered for them one night, I told them, I was like, I've seen y'all leave gifts out for them and apples and hoop for them and done the stick deal, got blessed by medicine men before you went out, stuck a monkey in the woods. I said, what I haven't seen you done? They were like, Moneymaker was like, yeah, what? I said, I haven't ever seen you polygraph anyone. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, you set up a polygraph, I'll take it. If I fail, I pay for it. If I pass, you pay for it. If I fail, don't put it in the show. If I pass, put it in the show. And the whole crew was stunned. They run with about 20 people. And you could hear a pin drop there for a while. And he was like, that's the first time in over 3 years that anybody's offered that. He said, I'm going to make some phone calls. And then it was never brought up again. They went with this crappy hair samples or excellent hair samples. You take your pick, because I don't know from what I was told to what came out in the show. Now, Renee, when I catered for them down in Lindsay, Oklahoma, which this family says that they see them all sizes, all colors, brown ones, black ones, gray ones, youth, adults, all of this on their property. And they did a daytime deal there and a nighttime deal there. But Renee stayed in a travel trailer that the family owned one night. And I came down and catered for them the next day. And Renee and I was eating off the tailgate of my truck. Everybody else was kind of away from us. And I said, well, did y'all come up with anything today or anything like that? And she was just kind of in a whispering voice that I'm still shook up from what happened last night. And I thought she was talking about something they did out in the field or whatever. And I was like, well, you got to tell me what's going on. And she was like, oh, you haven't heard. And then she started looking around at everybody like, not knowing whether I really should tell you this or not. And I was like, what happened? And she said, well, I was doing and I'm not real tech savvy, so I don't know what it was, but it was a podcast or whatever you call it, where she's on, you can look at her and it's on film or on the computer, and she's answering and replying to questions. And she said, you can see me on the video, and we're in the middle of this, and she's in that trailer. And then she said something just plopped on the front side of the trailer, the front end of it. And she said, best I can tell you, it sounded like a wet mop slapping against the trailer. And she said, you can see me in the video look that direction. And then she said, you can also see me in the video watch it. She said it sounded like it plopped on the front and then drug it all the way down the full 30-foot length of the trailer. And when it got to the back, it shoved it like it was shoving itself off of it. And she said, you can see me look at it when it plops, watch it all the way down, and then you can see my head shake, move as the whole trailer moves when it pushes off the back. And I was like, what the hell did you do? And she said, I ran to the door, slung it open, and there was nothing there. And then she told me, look over there, Jim. And I was like, yeah, what's the deal? It had been raining in Oklahoma the whole time they were here, pretty much off and on. And she said that where the trailer was, 7 foot from it, there was freshly poured gravel. I mean, like, these people must have got this gravel that week. Freshly poured gravel. But from the gravel to the door was flat, slimy topped red clay. If anything had touched that clay, it would be there. And she said, after seeing that there's nothing there, she said, I'd look down at the ground immediately, and there's no prints, no marks, no nothing in that red clay. She said, whatever did that had to have been standing 7 foot away. She said, first thing I did after that was grab my measuring tape and measure the distance from the trailer to that gravel. And she said, whatever made that sound, whatever raked its hand or whatever down the length of that trailer was standing on that gravel. Not a peep of that in the show.
See, all that should have been told.
Yeah. Something that I've always wondered about that show is you see the cast of the show and they're walking through the woods, and somebody's filming them.
Oh yeah,
So my question is anybody out there have a damn gun?
I didn't see one.
Because the thing is, they're. I mean, and
do you
look,
really
think
they? Do you really think? Okay, look, we went out with a group of how many people?
Yeah,
and we didn't expect to see anything because when you go out there with all those.
But keep this in mind: there's nothing indigenous to that part of Ohio that's going to get you. You know what I mean? There's no wolves, there's no bobcats, there's no bears.
When you're out there in a group of more than 5 or 6 people, you're not really nothing. You're not going to surprise anything.
Yeah, man.
That's why I say about that Finding Bigfoot crew.
Yeah.
They roll with a group of 20.
Okay.
Now, not all 20 of them go out. They're supporting cast, moving equipment, this and that, but they're all in the area. 20 of them, well,
and I think our, and we can't speak because we weren't there or whatever, but we know, I mean, from the angle of the television show that Renee is supposed to be the skeptic, and you can't really have her be a skeptic if she had her own experience. Now, of course,
but it would be a great nugget.
True. The hair sample is a great nugget.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's crying about, well, what proof is there? You yourself saw firsthand that they had proof.
Firsthand.
Well, you don't even need that. You don't need that proof because you saw the thing from 3 feet, 5 feet away.
Right.
Right. It seems to me like they just want to ignore any relevant proof that they can do to actually prove.
I'm going to give you another one on this line of stuff here. Yeah. Is that there was a video from that casino that was on a security video. And this is where it gets kind of crazy, but they measured from the cement to the light where this lit up in the back of the casino. That was 11.5 foot. In the video, there's a Bigfoot walking that takes a slight dip with his head not to touch that light and walks over and rummages in a dumpster. Now, what I was told was that Moneymaker bought that video from the Indians out here, and immediately it was wiped from everywhere on the internet. I couldn't find it anywhere. I could find recreations. There was a recreation of it, and I found it and watched it, but I don't even find it anymore.
Really? Now, it was, I don't remember what it hasn't been very many episodes ago on Sasquatch Chronicles, and Wes interviewed the one guy who was an investigator for the BFRO. And the reason he came on the show was to basically complain that he would turn in evidence from investigations, and a lot of it had to do with the orbs and the lights that people seemingly frequently report. None of that stuff would ever show up in the written and final reports. And they said it's like, they had, and like I said, I don't know this. All no one knows what we hear. It's almost like they have a theory that they want to stick to, and that's the only thing they're going to listen to.
It's like they have a directive of their own, and it's not exactly finding out what's real and what's not real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm real skeptical about them and about, what I consider the suppression of information. And like I say, I'm passionate about laying tile and making people's houses look pretty. I'm passionate about catering and food. That's what I do. I'm really not passionate about Bigfoot. But when I called the Finding Bigfoot crew, and why I called them was, hey, these people are, and me, I didn't know it, and I was kind of new to the whole deal. I was like, these people are really passionate about this. This is their thing. I'm going to call them and tell them what I experienced, and they're going to run with it or they're not. And, like I said, I'll be damned. They don't call me like 2-3 days later, Moneymaker, and says, can you tell me that story that you left on that recording last night? And I was like, yeah, I can tell it to you. And, the rest is history on that deal. But I have a real bad taste in my mouth about what I consider suppressing information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right now, and we've interviewed enough guests and listened to enough stuff that right now there are two schools of thought about Sasquatch. And one school of thought is that Sasquatch is some paranormal, supernatural creature that somehow is causally connected, or there's a nexus between them and these orbs. And then there's a school of thought, which is BFRO, which is these are just simply biological creatures. They're a lost primate or an undiscovered primate, and there's not a damn thing supernatural about them. And depending upon which camp you're in, I think you look at certain evidence and you dismiss it because it doesn't fit your narrative. You have a narrative that, hey, listen, I think these things are supernatural beings. And I think, from when I was on Wes's show, I think Wes is convinced now that there is a nexus between these orbs and Sasquatch. Now, what is that nexus, and what do those orbs represent? But there's one thing that everybody. We talked to Linda Gottfried, who's the godmother of Dogman, and she blew my mind that she basically is convinced that there's a nexus between these orbs and Dogman. And I think Wes is too. And so you say, well, okay, what are these orbs? Because these orbs are not biological, entities, So that runs completely opposite of what the BFR is doing. So I think probably, they're gonna screen the evidence and present it in a narrative that fits what their belief system is.
Well, I think Jim's experiences, no matter if Bigfoot got there through a spaceship or a hole in the
space-time continuum,
that by the time Jim ran into him, he was pretty much a physical being.
Well, but both. I mean, keep in mind, both camps believe that Bigfoot is a physical being. Yeah. The question is what's its genesis and where does it come from? Does it cross over through some sort of, veil through these orbs or something? Versus this is just a straight, biological creature and it falls within the evolutionary scale, and just because we, one of those things.
Well, don't discount the third criteria there. There's a school of thought out there that it's a little of both at different times. Like maybe when they come into this plane of existence, they're more energy. You'll have the orbs or some type of a residue to show that there's something, not quite right that gets them here. That's why we can't find them where they're hiding. But when they are here and that's all said and done, they are just as physical as you and I.
Right.
There's some people that believe that as well.
It'd be interesting if someone took a page from a ghost paranormal investigation and tried to measure like electromagnetic energy, electromagnetic field. But the problem is we get these Bigfoot sightings and stories like Jim's telling us. If we would have gotten it within 10 minutes of him telling it and had somebody on site with certain calibration machines where we could test electromagnetic, but that's never going to happen. You know what I mean?
There's a difference between going to a haunted location,
right,
and taking
absolutely, because assuming
you can prepare for that.
Well, but you also say, well, listen, if there is some sort of paranormal entity there, it's still there,
right?
Versus, harken back to an episode of Star Trek where they were trying to find a Klingon vessel that cloaked itself by whatever energy it would emit, and they could trace
you just
it.
Really jumped the shark here.
No, I'm following him. I was a Star Trek. Yeah, I'm following him.
Me and Jim are like Star Trek.
Tachyon emissions.
But you get what I'm saying is that something you could not see, but you could still track it through certain things. And with Bigfoot, and
yes.
you do that in the paranormal with ghost findings and stuff. So,
well, irregardless of whether Bigfoot showed up on the Enterprise or he was just camping in the woods outside of Oklahoma City.
Wow.
I gotta say, Jim, I'm glad that you didn't withhold any evidence like the BFRO.
Now, be careful. The BFR will come after you.
Why
Right.
You're the judge. I'm in Crawford County.
We live in the era of cancel culture, and they will try to cancel us.
They'll take all our sponsors away.
Good luck with that. You got to have them in order to take them.
Hey, wait a minute. We're sponsored by Evil Spirit Smash Liquor.
Evil Spirit Smash
Liquor. We might have to bring that commercial out again. All right.
But Jim, hey, thanks for coming on and sharing these experiences, because, they're great. I can't believe, I got to be honest, I can't believe you're still going up and down the river.
Jim, it's been fascinating. It has.
The thing about Jim's story is great is that he's telling us where he saw it, and he didn't see it where the hot spot would be. He saw it in a very unusual place.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I see it in a place that, there's a little bit of stigma attaching to someone saying that they saw a Bigfoot or something anyway. Well, try to say you saw a Bigfoot in Oklahoma city limits. Lace that shoe up and try that on for size. So, but yeah, and back to that supernatural deal, supernatural Bigfoot, my unprofessional opinion, no. Dogman and supernatural, yes.
Well, it's interesting you say that. So once we get done with this episode here, I think we're going to jump on the Patreon and talk a little bit about a possible Dogman sighting you had. So
I've enjoyed speaking with you.
So if anybody wants to hear about Jim's Dogman experience, come join us on Patreon, because it'll be up here in sometime in January.
Yes, it will.
But for now, we're going to end this episode. Thank Jim for
Jim, thanks, man.
Thanks, Jim, for joining us.
Thanks, I appreciate you for coming on. You've been a great guest.
Well, thanks, Judge and Shane and Jason. Enjoyed it, and happy hunting for you men.
Thank you.
Hey, we might have to come out to Oklahoma City and do some night floating.
I'm going to tell you, someone that is in the field, is passionate about it and everything else, needs to check this area out, because it seems, people talk about the migrating and this and that and their range. And if you ask me, this one just stays here.
Oh, boy.
All right.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jim.
I'll take you out. You bet.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, Never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.